Hey. So, I'm Tony Kriz. Hi. I work here. I wasn't really nervous this morning until my wife walked in the room and surprised me and showed up. Nobody in the world makes me as nervous as my wife. It's a very odd deal. Can't explain it. All right, before I get started here, just a few things I want to share with you. First of all, I have a new batch of students in my classes this semester, and I would just like to thank the registrar's office for giving me such a phenomenal group. I am already falling in love with this particular group of students this semester, and I also want to say hey to all my students who I've had in previous semesters. You guys are very dear to me, and it's nice to be with you. A couple other things. I've had opportunities, just as I started this new role here at the school, to meet with Dr. Cook behind closed doors, be able to sit and chat some. And I just want to say that that lady really cares about you. I mean, every conversation I have with her, I walk away and she cares about you. She doesn't see you as a list of names. She really just cares about you. And that's the kind of institution you've come to. And I find that really, really lovely. And it makes me very, very proud to be a part of this family. So, all right, so my title is the author in residence, which is kind of funky. In line with that, I'm currently writing a new book called Aloof. And it's a book about how it's a struggle to try and figure out how to live life with a God who hides. You know what I'm talking about? Like sometimes we're quick to, in religious circles, to talk about how God is tangible, touchable. And yet I know what it's like to be married and have somebody that I can touch and interact with. And sometimes it's hard. It's hard to figure God out. And it certainly is, the book is a celebration of God, absolutely, while being honest to the idea that it's challenging as a flesh being to interact with the Spirit. And so that's what I'm writing about. And in that, I've been able to explore my life a little bit. And there's actually a whole section of the book on my college years, which is kind of fun. Makes me think about all of you. When I went to college, I went to a secular college. I went to Oregon State University for my undergrad. I was 17 years old. And when I got to college, I had a lot of the kind of normal college excitement about the things I wanted to do, wanted to study, wanted to experience. But one thing that I knew for sure as I climbed in my car and I drove to Oregon State was that I wanted nothing to do with religion. I was done. I was sick of the version of Jesus that I had been given as a child. And that's not a slam on my church growing up. I love my church. It probably was my hearing. I couldn't hear rightly. But I had been given, or I had received, a version of religion I was not going to put up with any longer. So when I got to Oregon State, the only thing I wanted to do was avoid religion, avoid religious people, didn't want to go to church. Maybe some of you know what that feels like. So, God is funny. And the first weeks of school, he brought into my life a fellow by the name of Greg Vavra. And if I were to describe Greg Vavra to you, just imagine like a very, very sort of like Wolverine sort of looking man, right? The sort of person that has like 5 o'clock shadow at like 9:30 in the morning. You know, just big like arms and hands and strong. I mean, that guy, okay? So, like, yeah. Sort of like the missing link kind of thing. Anyway, so Greg comes into my life, and he was like a junior. He was stronger than me, smarter than me, and he decided that it was very important that I get involved in Christianity. And I kept telling him I didn't want to, and he didn't seem to care. So he would often physically drag me to religious events and make me sit in rooms like this one next to him. And he'd sit with me and make sure I didn't leave. And I knew that he could hurt me. So I chose wisely to stay. And one day, Greg came to my room, and Greg said, hey, there's this conference over the winter break. I want you to come with me. I want you to go to it. It'll be great. It's kind of a Jesus thing. I think you should come. It costs a couple $100. It'll be great. And I was like, oh, Greg, so nice of you to invite me. Really appreciate that. Good fella, you. But, I can't go. I don't want to go. He's like, what do you mean? I said, I don't got the money. He's like, really? That's it? Yeah. So, of course, Greg goes out, comes back the next day with $200 in his hand, hands it to me. He says, now you're going. And I said, well, Greg, I'd love to go, but, it's winter break, and my mom, she's so great. Winter break is sacred to our family. She really wants me around. I don't want to let her down. And he's like, really? You're going to give me your mom as your excuse? I said, yeah. So Greg walks over, and he literally grabs the receiver, and he says, what's her number? Right? Dials her number. He holds the receiver to my face and mouths over and over again, ask her, 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 while I'm standing there with the phone against my face as he's holding it. So suffice to say, I ended up going to this conference, this Christian conference, where we did lots of praise exercise and heard some good speakers, and it was okay. But one thing that Greg didn't tell me, I think on purpose, was Greg did not tell me that on the third day of this particular conference, everybody in the conference was going to go out into the city and do door-to-door evangelism in the city of Portland. He didn't tell me that part of the story. And religious people can be very, very manipulative. I don't know if you know this. And so they devised this plan. It was an excellent plan, actually. They devised this plan where they stuck me in a room with a bunch of people, many of whom were good-looking young ladies. And they paired us up like boys and girls, and I got paired up with this really pretty girl from Idaho, right, in the room. I don't even know what I'm doing there, right? I'm just standing there, and she's with me. And so I'm like, this is great. I don't know what the activity is, but I'm totally in. And then they sort of revealed to me that the activity was the two of us were going to go do door-to-door evangelism, and we were a team. And then I was stuck, right? So end up out in the city, and without going into the whole story, which is horrible, when we get dropped off, this young lady whose name is Lauren, and I don't hide her name because I want her to be ashamed. Lauren, as soon as the van drove away, explained to me that her spiritual gift is prayer. Yeah, the religious people in the room just got it. So her gift is prayer. So she explained to me that when she goes out and does evangelism, talking with other people about the story of Jesus, her job is only to pray. She never says a word. Right? And it's the other person's responsibility to do all the talking. And so she just commended me for my role as the talker. Right? I don't believe in Jesus. I don't want to be a Christian. And I'm on the corner with Lauren being told that I'm the one who has to do the talking that afternoon. And being the religious person that I was, or raised as a well-programmed religious person, I just went along with it because I didn't know what else to do. So I went to 40 houses that day, knocked on the door, and read my little script, transitioning into the story of Jesus. Would you like to have a conversation about faith in Jesus, the cross, and the resurrection? And sure enough, I had a dozen conversations that day with people about Jesus when I didn't believe. And I assure you, Lauren did not say a word. She stood to the side, completely quiet. Trying to the box. No, that's a mime joke. Okay. So a funny thing happened that day when I went back to the hotel, and I went up to my room, and I was very sober after this sort of going door to door and having these conversations. I sat down and I started to think to myself. I wasn't so much talking to God, but I was talking to myself about God. And that kind of seemed like a step in the right direction. And the conversation I was having was something like this. What just happened? I just walked around and I talked to people about God. You know, I think if God was real, God would spend a lot of time feeding the poor and caring for the sick. But another thing I think God would do is God would walk around and just have conversations about faith and life and heaven, eternity. And in a very, very strange way that day, I had this sensation that I had participated with God. Maybe the first time I'd ever had that sensation in my entire life as a freshman in college. And so when I went back to college, back to Oregon State, I decided that I was going to continue to try and participate with God. Didn't want to go to Christian meetings, didn't want to know religious people. But I did want to begin to try and do this thing of participating and figuring out Jesus. So I started to go out 2 to 3 afternoons a week my freshman year, and I would sit down with total strangers on campus and say, hey, do you have a minute? I can talk to you. I'm trying to figure out what I believe. I wonder if you have a few minutes. And I would have conversations with strangers about faith. What do you believe? How did you get there? Here's what I'm thinking about right now. I think probably Jesus is actually somebody I should be processing personally. What do you think about that? Can we talk about this a little bit? And I would have 15 to 45-minute conversations with a handful of people a week, just trying to figure it out. And by the end of my freshman year, Jesus had my heart, and I was in. The theme of the chapel is discovering Jesus again. Is that on the screen? No? Okay, discovering Jesus again. God, I pray that you would speak to us. And in whatever way, I pray that we would take one big step towards Jesus this morning. Amen. Somebody recently told me that 30% of the students at Warner Pacific do not come from Christian homes or church backgrounds. I don't know if that stat's 100% accurate, but it does tell me that there's a large group of people probably sitting in this room right now who don't come from church backgrounds, don't come from Christian homes, maybe don't really care about the sort of topics that often come up in a chapel meeting. I want you to know, I'm glad you're here. I'm with you. There's one rule, there's the first rule in all of my classes. I make it very, very clear the first day of class, with every class I've ever had, and anybody who's had me in the room knows the first rule: no pretending. There's no pretending in my classroom. When we talk about faith, life, belief, God, no pretending. Let's lay it on the table. Let's deal with it. Let's squish around on our thoughts together. I'd like to read to you from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 16, starting in verse 13. Now, when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he was asking his disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? The Son of Man, he was referring to himself. Who do people say the Son of Man is? And the disciples said, some say John the Baptist, and others Elijah, but still others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. Jesus said to them, but who do you say that I am? Simon Peter answered, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus said to him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. So Jesus turns to his disciples, and he's like, all right, you guys spend a lot of time out there in the world, and you're hanging out with people, you're having these Jesus conversations, these side conversations all over the place. Who do people say that I am? And the disciples, I imagine, they start like raising their hands to be the first one to get an answer into Jesus. You know, they're all like probably front row Sunday school people. Oh, got one. John the Baptist, Elijah, Jeremiah, one of the prophets, right? So they're all kind of throwing out their ideas. The first thing that I notice when I look at this is nobody is saying Jesus is just a dude. That option is not on the table in the conversation about who Jesus is. Jesus is not just a dude. He's not just another guy. He's not just sort of one of the interesting people running around. The lowest bar is set at John the Baptist or Elijah or Jeremiah, transforming people of their generations. That's the lowest bar. That's where the conversation begins. You cannot be morally and intellectually responsible person, young intellectuals in this room, and place Jesus any lower than one of the most significant people in human history. Humanity has voted Mahatma Gandhi, the Dalai Lama, Muhammad, the prophet, have voted, and everybody says one of the most significant human beings to ever walk the planet. That's where the bar begins. That is the lowest rung on the ladder of Jesus. That's the lowest rung. You start there to process who this person is. Hear me. You are on a journey. I do not demand on any level that you believe in Jesus as the Son of God, as transcendent. But you must begin the conversation at one of the most transcendent, wise human beings that have ever walked. Okay, let me see if I found this quote. I stumbled across this quote this week from Albert Einstein. I am a Jew, but I am enthralled by the luminous figure of the Nazarene. Jesus is too colossal for the pen of phrasemongers, however artful. No man can read the Gospels without feeling the actual presence of Jesus. His personality pulsates in every word. No myth is filled with such life. Theseus and the other heroes of his type lack the authentic vitality of Jesus. In the year 2000, I stumbled onto the campus of Reed College. It's a liberal arts college not far from here, southeast Portland. And I spent 3 years there as an unofficial chaplain, hanging out on campus, having these conversations, these Jesus conversations. Reed is nationally recognized as our liberal school in the country, the least religious college in the country, the campus most likely to ignore God. Every freshman at Reed is required to read a quarter of their Bible. Because no intelligent member of the human race can move through the story of humanity without having a grasp of their Bible. Totally non-religious campus. Every Reed student is dealing with who Jesus is. And when we walked on campus, we realized that asking questions like, Jesus is the Son of God, or Jesus is the only way to heaven, those sorts of questions may not be the place to start. So we started the conversation here. This is one of the most significant voices in the history of humanity. And we asked students to come have that conversation with us. And where historically there had only been a handful of Christians on campus ever, when I say handful, like 3 at a time, we had groups of dozens showing up to talk about that. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about Jesus as one of the most significant voices in human history. And together we discovered that Jesus might just be the best voice in human history. The most significant contributor to the conversation of humanity, life, future, eternity, goodness, faith, truth. And along the way, many people came to devote their lives to Jesus of Nazareth. Some say Elijah, some say John the Baptist, Jeremiah, one of the other prophets. But who do you say that I am? Jesus asked, and Simon Peter answers, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus said to him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Okay, so here's a little bit for those of you in the room who've sat down at the table of life and you've pushed all your chips in for Jesus. All right? Where Jesus goes, I go. Just a few thoughts for you. First of all, Jesus is not an ideology. Jesus is a person. Jesus is a living presence. Jesus is not a theology. Jesus is not a list of ideas. Jesus is not a list of answers. Primarily, Jesus is a person. A present person, who wants to meet with you. I'm right now trying to write a book about how that happens. In his elusiveness, and he is elusive at times, he wants to meet with you. There's a student on this campus who met with Jesus last year. Personally, met with Jesus. Phenomenal story. But then when she tried to process that experience with others on campus, they kept telling her that she had done it wrong, that her ideas were bad. She needed cleaner theology. Instead of just inviting and celebrating, you've met with Jesus. Stay on that path. Jesus is more vested in your spiritual story than your best friend is. Jesus is more vested in your spiritual story than your mom and dad are. Jesus is walking with you. And he is not impotent. The other thought I wanted to give you is for those of you who are all in at the table. If we're going to take Jesus on, we need to take the whole thing. We need to at least enter the conversation about the whole thing. Yes, Jesus is the way to heaven. Yes, Jesus died on a cross. Yes, Jesus rose again. Yes, Jesus is the Son of God. Yes, Jesus is the center of our belief. Yes, Jesus holds the universe together, for he's over all, in all, and through all. And through him, all things are held together. Yes. But we have to take all of Jesus, including sell all you have and give to the poor. If you pray, you can move a mountain. Love your enemy. Rejoice in pain. If someone asks you for your coat, give them your cloak as well. Turn the other cheek. I'm not saying what you're supposed to do with those phrases, but we have to take all of what Jesus said and process it and let it leak into the DNA of our lives, because right now you are setting your lives in motion in a particular direction. Let these ideas of Jesus leak into you. And whether you say he is a prophet, or you say, because that's where the conversation begins, that is the lowest bar. One of the greatest voices in the history of mankind, most significant, influential voices in the history of mankind. Or if you climb that ladder higher to believe that he is the Christ, the Son of the one true God. Wherever you are, what we want for you, what we plead and beg God for you, what we pray for you, is that Jesus would leak into your life. And that you would have the conversations of transformation together. We want this place to be a playground of spirituality, where you get lost in side corners in conversations about what does it look like to risk around faith. What does it look like to take these ideas and actually believe them and run with them and do something you have never done before? That is what we want this place to be, a playground of faith. Who knows? Who knows what might happen? I think the world will become a different place. That's what I think. My sophomore year of college, I wasn't even a year into trying to figure out how to be a Christian, a Jesus guy. And a couple influential people on campus gave me a phone call and asked me to meet them for coffee. So I showed up, and they said, hey, we got this thing. There's this prayer meeting on campus. It's been going on for years. And the person's been leading, it's graduating. We wonder if you'd be willing to take over and lead this prayer meeting. Me and my buddy Patrick. And up to this point, the whole of my contribution to the spiritual life on campus was being the skit guy at one of the meetings. Okay, that was my job. So the idea that they would ask me to lead a prayer meeting, I thought was pretty ridiculous. So Patrick and I showed up for this thing. And it's exactly what you might expect at a secular college campus prayer meeting. Obscure corner of campus, 5 people show up Monday nights at 9 o'clock. the most insignificant hour in the week on a college campus, right? So we would show up, Patrick and me, we sit in the front of the room, and 3 or 4 people would show up and sit, and we'd go, all right, let's pray. And we decided that as a group, with just a few other people, that we were going to begin to dare to risk, to beg God to transform us and transform our school. That was it. No chatty, 9 o'clock, boom, 9:03, praying. Prayed until 10. Got up and left. And we said, we're going to do it. We're going to hold vigil right here, Monday nights, 9 to 10. We're going to do it. Patrick, me, and 3 other religious nerds. We're going to do it. And a funny thing happened. A month later, there were 10 of us. A month after that, there was 20. By the turn of the calendar year, we were looking at 70, 80 people. It got as high as about 120. Other religious meetings on campus started to cancel during the week because they wanted to make sure that everybody was freed up to come and have this moment to beg God. Teach us to be different and transform where we live. People came. That's all I want for you guys. I want you to show up while you're here. I want you to dare to risk. I want you to be the revolutionaries that you already are, and you just haven't discovered it. God, I beg you to be with these students.